Hello, Zuko here. If you don't know, my name is Jess, but I go by Zimmy on the internet because one time I was 15. So, today I'm here to talk about all the books that I read in the month of August. I believe there are 15 that I read and 4 that I DNF'd. I would also like to preface this by saying that I put trigger warnings at the tops of all of my reviews on Goodreads, so if you'd like to know the trigger warnings on these books, or at least the ones that I remembered, feel free to go check out my Goodreads. Let's start out with the first book I read this month. And that would be Half Bad by Sally Green. This is the first book in a trilogy about a world in which there are like a subspecies of people who are witches, and some of them are white witches, so they're good, and black witches who are evil, I guess, though it's never like explained why they're evil. And like the white witches have a horrible bureaucracy that lives to like oppress and kill the black witches. This follows a boy who is both. His mom was a white witch who had a child with a black witch, which is unheard of, and he's super ostracized from the other witches because he has the potential to be bad, as if everyone doesn't have the potential to be bad. And this follows him kind of trying to run away from the white witches. I've heard that the third book gets queer, so I'm considering reading on. But I also heard it has some tropes that we don't love. I don't want to spoil it. I don't think anyone's going to read this, but you know, I don't want to spoil it. That's kind of the plot of this one. I gave this like a 2.5, 3 stars. It was like pretty average. It was a little bit silly, but it was an experience, and I really like these covers, so I want to read them all so that I have an excuse to keep them. Next, I read The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. I was fully expecting not to like this, and like I need a different copy because this one looks like shit. But this is a book that kind of, it is a portal fantasy in which a main character ends up going to a world that is kind of like a dark fairy tale. I don't really know how to explain this book without giving away spoilers, though it was set in World War II London initially, and then it goes to portal fantasy. This is also like maybe more of a older teen book than like a younger book. It looks like it would be for younger people, and it's very gory. I ended up enjoying this a fair amount, and I gave this 4 to 5 stars. Next, I read A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. This is it's always explained as a Black Mermaid book. It's not really a Black Mermaid book. Low-key disappointed in that. It follows 2 essentially sisters. One of them is a siren in a world where like sirens are really oppressed, I guess, because everyone is scared of what they can do using their voice, like they can compel you to do things. And another sister who doesn't know what she is, but she's realizing she might not just be a human. I enjoyed this book well enough, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It felt like it was magical realism, like contemporary. It was all set in like present day United States if there were magical creatures. And I don't know. Something about this book I just like didn't love. I did end up giving it like a 3.5, 4 stars, which makes it sound like I liked it quite a bit. And I didn't dislike it. I just, I had mixed feelings about this because I think the hype made me want a story that it wasn't. So yeah, that's this. Next, I read The River Has Teeth by Erica Waters. This is a book that follows dual perspective of a girl named Della, whose family is local witches, and a girl named Natasha, whose sister has gone missing. And their paths cross as Natasha wants to use magic to try to find her sister. And Della wants to kind of keep things hush-hush because her mom is turning into a monster, and she is worried that her mother is what killed Natasha's sister. I really enjoyed this book. It felt like the kind of rivery marsh bayou area that they lived in was almost its own character. In the first chapters, like, it honestly feels like Della lives in like a different time than everybody else. And then you go to the next chapter where it starts as Natasha's point of view, and you're like, oh, they have cell phones and stuff. This is present day. And I thought that was a really interesting way to like set the characters up. And I really enjoyed this book. This is also queer, and just it's a queer mystery. And I think that there are a lot of those right now, and I'm kind of into it. I also gave this book a 4 to 5 stars. Next, I read The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. Now, one of my close friends has always really liked this book. And at this point, I'm checking it up to being pure nostalgia, because having read this for the first time at like 25, this was a very average book. It was another zombie apocalypse book where the survivors are like kind of the monster, and there's a religious cult that is like kind of abusing people in it because they're the survivors and they think that their way of surviving was through God or whatever. I feel like that kind of book was a dime a dozen at one point, like especially with like the religious aspects, and I don't think that this book brought anything new to the table. So I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Queen of Hearts by Colleen Oakes. This is a gritty, I guess, Alice in Wonderland retelling of how the Queen of Hearts became the way she is. Like with most gritty retellings, this wasn't very good. This book had one of those like parent characters who just hates the main character for no reason. It's like the dad just hates the Queen of Hearts. What's her name? I don't even know. Oh, Dinah. They named the Queen of Hearts Dinah after Alice's cat, I guess. But her dad just like hates her and is mean to her for no reason. And it's wild. I'm so tired of that in books. I don't think it's as prevalent now, but like when you read it, you're still just like, this is exhausting. But this book, like nothing really happened. But Dinah had a feeling that something was going to happen through the whole book. And then like finally at the end, something kind of happened after she like kind of instigated it, I guess. I will not be continuing on with the series if that isn't clear. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. It was not very good. Next, I read The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould. This is also a queer book. This follows the main character, Logan, whose parents are TV ghost hunters, as they go back to her parents' hometown where they were kind of ostracized for being queer. And a girl named Ashley who lives in that small town whose boyfriend went missing. And then other people started to go missing and they're kind of blaming Logan's dads. And Ashley and Logan are kind of stuck together to try to solve this mystery because Ashley hopes that maybe Logan has experience with ghost hunting and could find out what happened to her boyfriend. I really enjoyed this book. I really like the ghost hunters aspect of it. I thought that was fun. The thing about this book that I didn't love, I feel like in YA horror, we don't know how to make something like airy yet. And that's a thing is like society we have to get better at. But other than that, like I liked the characters and I liked the story. I just didn't love kind of how it ended. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Boneless Mercies by Genevieve Tucholke. So I actually didn't fully read this book. I fell asleep with 4 hours left in the audiobook. And I just never went back because it was so boring. I don't know how to explain how this book was so boring, but it felt impossible to pay attention to. Like nothing important happened. The characters I didn't care about. It was just very bleh. So I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars, which I kind of feel bad about, but like it was so boring that I fell asleep through the last half of it and didn't care to go back. So that feels like a 1-star read to me. It's not a DNF. I heard the last like 3 or 4 paragraphs of the book, so I read it all, just maybe not conscious. Then I read Everland by Wendy Spinale. This is a like dark Peter Pan retelling, I guess, where a virus is let out of a laboratory that ends up killing, I think, all of the adults that get exposed to it and most of the women. And it is slowly starting to kill all of the like young boys, teenage boys, kids. And it is some people's job to go like find the cure to the virus. So yeah, this is like a fun Peter Pan retelling. If you didn't like Lost in the Neverwoods because it was bad, maybe pick this one up because it was fast-paced and fun, but this does read more like a middle grade than a YA book. So that's my critique of this. I was starting to get bored by the end because I'm like, these books aren't for me. But like, it was fun. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Last Girls by Dimitra Brodsky. This follows 3 sisters who are living in a survivalist cult, and there's alternative chapters of a boy who is trying to find his missing sisters, as you can imagine how that goes. I found the survivalist aspects of this book like interesting, but then a lot of it just seemed like silly. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on this book, but like not strong enough opinions. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Why is this wet? Ew, why is it sticky? What did I spill on my book? I'll deal with that another time. Then I read The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. This is a like adult, almost sci-fi, I guess sci-fi book, where there are people who keep being reborn into the same life. So if you were born in 1961 and died in 2030, once you die in 2030, you go back to 1961 and you just do that cycle over and over again, but you're able to like kind of find and communicate with the other people who can do the same thing but at different years. So like information can be passed down if you go, like if the youngest person goes to the oldest dying person in these groups, like you can pass it back because they'll go back to the start and they can, you know, you can pass information around and stuff. But it is about a man named Harry August who meets another man who wants to advance technology faster because he has lived to see where technology kind of goes. Not super far in advance, but like enough. I think the other man dies in like 2020. So when he's in like 1980, he wants to bring the 2020 technology down to 1980, and it's starting to cause the end of the world. I enjoyed this book, but I also found it really hard to follow. I'm not a big reader, I guess, of adult sci-fi or adult fiction at all, so maybe it was just like that had my brain going. But I did enjoy it. I think we can keep it. It was a bit hard to get through. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read We Used to Be Friends by Amy Spalding. This follows the perspective of two best friends, James and Kate. I believe James' perspective is going from the present backwards, and Kate's perspective is going from the first, like the beginning of 12th grade forwards. I don't know, that part definitely confused me. I wasn't great at that. But it is about how they kind of ended up growing apart and kind of ending their friendship by the end of 12th grade after being friends for like 12 years. I didn't think I was going to like this book. And then I really liked this book because, like, who hasn't experienced a brutal friendship breakup? I feel like that is a much more universal and heart-wrenching experience than romantic relationship breakups, which not everybody has. And I just feel like more books should be written about that topic. I do have a couple more, I think, on my shelves. Now I'm more excited to read them. There's also a queer main character in this, if you are curious. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because I felt like it talked about things that aren't talked about enough, and I really liked the way it did that. Then I reread The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. This is one of my favorite books that I read in 2020, and I wanted to reread it because I was having a hard, like, brain focusing day. I wasn't able to consume new media because my brain just refused to listen, but it would listen to things that it already was familiar with. So I reread this. I gave this 5 stars. This follows a girl named Hazel and her brother Ben, I believe. Yes? Yes. They live in a town where it's always been like a big fae kind of presence, and in the forest of that town is a boy with horns in a glass coffin who has been sleeping there for as long as anybody can remember. And it's just a Holly Black fae book that is connected to the Folk of the Air series, if you are wondering. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. Love this book. Then I read The Project by Courtney Summers. This is, I believe, a follow-up novel to Sadie, which was so good and such a good audiobook. If you haven't listened to it, listen to it. But this follows two sisters, B and Lo, and it is told from the perspective of Lo, kind of present day forward, who is looking for her sister B. And it follows B from the day Lo was born, kind of onward, until you kind of figure out how the paths mesh. This is a cult book, so Lo is a reporter. She always has wanted to like get to the bottom of things and know what's going on, and her sister B has been missing for years, ever since Lo and her parents were in a car accident that the parents tragically died in, and Lo ended up in the hospital. They were kind of expecting her to die, but a man came and performed a miracle, and Lo survived. So B left Lo to join this cult because she really believed in the man who she thinks saved her sister. I really enjoyed this book. I've heard people say it wasn't as like twists and turnsy as they like their thrillers to be, and that's fair enough. I haven't read too many thrillers, like mystery books, I guess, so I really enjoyed this and I give this 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. I remember a couple of years ago, all of the like bigger booktubers were sponsored to talk about this book, and I don't remember anybody mentioning how intense the child abuse in this book is, so I feel like you all should know, because while it didn't bother me particularly, I know there are other people who it might actually be damaging to read about out of the blue. I remember hearing that this is a book that follows two former foster siblings who end up being like reconnecting with each other, and that one of the main characters has ADHD. I do not remember it being mentioned that this has horrific child abuse in it. It follows a kid named Julian who is living with his uncle after his parents died when he was a child, and a kid named Adam who used to be Julian's foster brother. It's Adam's last year of school. He's doing a volunteer thing with the school counselor and ends up having to go and pick up Julian, so they kind of reconnect Julian is only like 14 and he's in his first year of high school, but they end up like reconnecting and becoming friends. Adam kind of realizes that maybe Julian's home life isn't doing so well. Yeah, I've maybe spoiled the fact that there's child abuse, but like if you want that to be a secret, I don't know, that feels a little bit weird to me. I liked this book, but I genuinely did not know how to rate it because I don't know, I don't know how to rate this. So I didn't end up rating it, but I did read it, and I have a lot of mixed feelings. So yeah, that's all of the books that I read. On to the 4 books that I DNF'd, which would be The Bone Witch by Rin Chapeko. I wanted to like this book. It seemed like a fun, weird fantasy about like a necromancer, essentially, who rose her brother from the dead, but I just didn't care, I guess. It was one of those books where like the world building, my brain was just like... So I DNF'd this one pretty quick. I also DNF'd Frankly in Love by David Yoon. There is a certain way that contemporary YAs want to write men, and I hate it, and this is one of them. Mary H.K. Choi is also one of them, and Adam Silvera is another. This book felt like it was written by Mary H.K. Choi and Adam Silvera, like mashed together, and those are 2 authors that I have not enjoyed the books of, so I didn't enjoy this either, but it did have blue sprayed edges, which is kind of the whole reason I bought it. I had a feeling I wasn't gonna like it. Then, and like I'm kind of sad about this one, I DNF'd The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I was enjoying it. It has a lot of intense world building and stuff that I was finding it hard to follow, and like by the last half of it, third of it, I was finding I didn't really want to pick it up because I didn't care what happened next. And I also am aware this is going to be a 7-book series, and these are big chunky books, and like I don't want to read 7 of these books, so I think I just kind of was distancing myself from them. Yeah, I had to DNF this because I just didn't want to pick it up anymore, and I was finding it really confusing about what was even going on because there was so much world building and I was struggling following it. And lastly, I DNF'd Ripper by Stefan Petruccia. This book gives away its like big twist within the first 10 pages. And I'm gonna say spoilers for this book if you really don't want to know. But it like starts, let's see, on page 4. Here's a letter from Jack the Ripper. And then that's like the prequel chapter, and then it goes to like present day, where this main character is kind of trying to find out who his dad is, and he's like, he's an orphan, he's looking through like their files, and he finds a piece of paper, and on page 9 there is a letter, and obviously that's like a letter, it's supposed to symbolize like their handwriting and stuff. It's in the exact same format as the first letter 4 pages earlier, so they gave away the twist within the first 10 pages that his dad is Jack the Ripper. And I looked on Goodreads and read some spoilery reviews, and yep, his dad's Jack the Ripper, but his dad's Jack the Ripper, but he wears a mustache, so you can't tell he's Jack the Ripper. Yeah, I really like this cover, so I'm kind of sad, but I don't want to read about Jack the Ripper and a mustache pretending he's not this kid's dad. So those are all of the books that I read and attempted to read in the month of August. I believe my video for next week is going to be a haul video, which I filmed like a month ago, and now I have like quite a few books that I'm starting to need to plan out my next haul video, but you know, life's like that sometimes. And September's gonna have like a lot of good releases, I think. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know down below your favorite book that you read in the month of August, and I will see you whenever I do my next video. That was my puppy snoring.